Good morning and welcome to our third and last morning webinar focusing on the conditions of freedom of speech for smaller publicists. Today we're looking outside of Sweden with two very interesting examples. My name is Anna Johansson and I work at Nätverkstan. Nätverkstan is a Swedish knowledge center that supports the cultural sector. We're independent and a non-profit organization. Among other things, we provide a platform for Sweden's cultural journals, and one of our missions is to support free speech in the public sphere. So to everyone listening, if you want to, I just want to let you know that you're not visible or audible, so you can just relax and continue to drink your coffee or brush your teeth or wherever you're up to. So I'm very happy that we have two interesting guests with us today. Thank you so much for taking your time and also getting up quite early in the morning for us. Maria Stepanova, you're a poet, a journalist, and the editor of Kolta, a Russian internet publication that's covering contemporary art and culture. And you're today blocked in Russia. Kolta also has a very interesting collaboration with Glänta, a Swedish cultural journal, and we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. So welcome, Maria, and thank you for joining.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. With us, we also have Fadi Baki. You live in Beirut, Lebanon, and you work in the fields of animation and filmmaking and comics. You're the co-founder of Samandal Comics, a publishing house dedicated to comics and animation in the Arab region. And I know that you're also now working at developing an online platform for everything Arab and animated. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me as well.
So we'll actually start by learning a little bit more about Fadi's work with Samandal Comics and your experience with the Lebanese state. And after that, I will talk to you, Maria, about Kolta's situation. So, and in the end, hopefully, we will have some time for questions. So if you're listening and you have a question, you could use the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and we will pick a few questions at the end. So before I talk to you, Fadi, it'd be really nice to have a little look at what Samandal Comics looks like, what your magazine looks like. So let's share some pictures.
Do you want me to talk a little bit about them as we look at those images? Might be,
sure. Yeah. Why not?
So Samandal sort of came out in 2006, 2007. Oh, my cat. Cat. Sorry about this. It came out in 2006, 2007. In Lebanon and in the region, there are comics. Most of them were imported. Growing up, I read a lot of imported comics, whether it was American comics or Japanese comics. So they were around us. And of course, European comics. There's a lot of European comics here as well. So they were around us. Of course, when we were kids, we never knew that they weren't actually from Lebanon. So as we grew up, we sort of realized that, oh, this is a lot of imported culture. And there's a lot of people who, basically 4 people that were the Samandal team who grew up kind of out of this milieu. We grew up reading these things, and there was never a place to publish these stories. We wanted to do comics. I think everyone had tried to write comics individually, and in the region in general, there's a lot of singular efforts, individuals themselves sort of publishing. But what we decided to do is like, hey, let's actually make a magazine where, if we want to publish these things, maybe there's other people. And what we started out was like a very small zine, and we just put a call out, and we were surprised by the quality that we got. We were targeting the Middle East because Lebanon is quite small in that sense, and we got all kinds of people. 2006 was a little bit of a flashpoint. I think there was a generation that grew up reading these things that suddenly could publish and do these things, and suddenly what we found, what I remember the first zine that we printed, we're like, let's just do 500 copies because we're going to be stuck with these things in our face for quite some time. They were gone in that one night. And so we quickly realized that there is an interest. And so this is basically how Samandal Comics sort of came about. Really, we just wanted to publish our own comics. And what happened is it became like a publishing house. And also there was like a sea change that was happening in the region. It was very much followed by, there's Tuk Tuk magazine that happened in Egypt, that they're like, hey, wait, look, Samandal are doing something like this. We've been wanting to do something like that. And so you have a number of publications showing up in the Middle East at the same time. It was very exciting because suddenly this thing sort of blew up in our face. We were not ready for it. We were not set up as a publishing house. We never thought of ourselves as a publishing house. Yeah, I mean, we started putting out sort of quarterly prints of, we wanted to come out in print of the magazine. We would do these events, which were, I mean, in many ways, like the mission of Samandal was to sort of change the idea of what comics are to the public, which were always considered like this was kids stuff, you know, or it was trash that was imported from the outside. You know, so we were like, wait a minute, we can tell stories that interest us. You know, we were at that point, we're 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds. We're like, there are things that we want to talk about that, you know, we're not finding a place to do that. Specifically, also 2006 was a difficult time for. It's always a difficult time for Lebanon, but specifically at that time, the country was very polarized. Sorry, I'm gonna get rid of my cat. The country was quite polarized between different factions, and all kinds of media had to basically become polarized. And in many ways, the stories that we wanted to tell, or at least the ideas, the stances that we wanted to have about our country, about the region, were neither of those. So Samandal was supposed to be a place to discuss these things. At least that's what we said to ourselves, and that's what we wanted to do. We sort of were like, okay, if people think that comics are for children, then we can probably get away with stuff. That, you know, of course, we always said comics are for adults, and we put a nice big 18+ at the bottom, not because there was anything raunchy in it, but just because we wanted to sort of, you know, get this idea across that those are comic stories for you know, 20s, 30s. The subject should interest people of that age. And I remember we're always worried about sort of, you know, we just didn't think this through properly. We were worried about sexual topics. At some point, we had there was a comic that was sent in that had some naked genitalia, and I remember at some point they were like, do we cover this? Do we not cover it? It was a question that we were asking ourselves because we were worried about what would happen. And at some point we're like, okay, what if we actually, you know, recrop the image? And they're like, okay, Fadi, you go do this. And the comic book artist is like, look, I'm not gonna censor my own work. You can do that yourself. And I remember just sitting there as I was about to do it, I'm like, I can't do this. This is so wrong. And so we ended up sort of publishing it, and we're like, we got away with it. Nobody cared. A few years later, we got sued, but not for this issue. And I mean, we can talk about this later. We find out that the issue is completely different. We were thinking about this completely wrong. And what we were worried about ended up being like sort of something that was inconsequential. And there was a whole field of discussion, which really had to do more with our mission, which is trying to talk about a region outside of these polarized stances.
Yes, so yeah, since we don't have so much time, like, please tell us more about what happened when you got sued and why, and what was it that kind of evoked the state to notice you and.
So what happens is in 2009 we put out this was issue 7. It was called Revenge. The theme was revenge. It was out in co-publication with a Belgian also like a comic outfit called Employé du Mois. We're very proud of this because every issue ended up being a collaboration of sorts, because for us, the networking across the region and also with people that are doing comics outside was quite important. We can talk about that later if you want, but so this collaboration was very exciting for us, and we had like a nice thick issue to put out. And what happened was 3 months after we put this out, the editors, we're 4 editors. It's me, Omar Khouri, Hatem Imam, and Lena Merhej. We're the founding members and the editor. We're basically doing everything. We're designing it and publishing it, and we 3 of us got a knock at the door, and we were subpoenaed to show up in court. We didn't know why. Publishing in Lebanon requires a license, and we didn't do that. So we kind of pretended that we're not a magazine. We pretended that we're a book. That was one way to get about the licensing. The licensing is part of a bureaucracy that's very corrupt, and so we didn't have that. We thought this was the problem, and when we went to the police station, we had like all these stories about why we don't have a license and we're a book, and we very quickly realized that they actually had a problem with 2 comics that had shown up there. And the 2 comics were by one of the editors. It's this comic, and a Belgian comic book artist called FRITT. So it was Lena Merhej and FRITT. We didn't understand what the problem was, but what we didn't realize was the church, specifically the Catholic Media Center, had somehow gotten a hold of this issue and took issue with like 2 specific pages of it. One was where Lena was basically doing literal translations of things that you would say in Arabic. Yes, that's the page. And so which in Arabic you say something like يحرق دينك, which means it's kind of like like it's kind of like a screw you, but it actually literally translates to may your religion burn down. And so she actually illustrated literally how to do that, and in doing so she burnt a sheikh and a priest. It's very bad. And then she like, just to be equal, she burnt everyone, all the other religious figures also. So she set them on fire. The other comic, actually maybe if we put it up on screen, is the other comic was sort of like a retelling maybe of it's sort of about a drunken Roman soldier who keeps having sex with he keeps getting drunk and keeps having sex with various people. And he's very ashamed about this, and so he keeps killing them. And one of the people he actually sends to be crucified. And in the last panel, it's basically him standing in front of the guy who he had sex with, and he's like, aha, I got you. You're the homosexual, not me. And they're like, okay, you're making fun of Jesus, aren't you? And that's what the issue was about.
Okay,
and
so what happened? Like how did this turn out? Like how did it affect you, this lawsuit?
So basically, they threw everything at us. It was the church and the state that came after us. We were accused of inciting sectarian strife, false news. I don't know what that is, but but essentially we're trying to start a civil war by inciting sectarian strife. It was a 5-year lawsuit, which really had no basis. Legally, there was no basis for this. The fact that they didn't come after the institution that was Samandal. They didn't actually even try to ban the comic. What they came after was us individually. As it wasn't even the writers. It was me and Hatem and Omar Khouri. And every legally, we were on solid ground. There was no basis for them to come after us, but they still basically circumvented the law, and we lost after 5 years, both the case and the appeal. And we were forced to pay $7,000 each out of our own pocket. And plus, there's this weird, again, it's not a legal thing. What they add to your criminal record is something called an affidavit of subjugation. which it's essentially a warrant that whenever we do anything with the state, it shows up on the computer that these people have done something, and you can just subjugate them as you wish. And so just make our lives worse whenever you're at the airport, whenever you're trying to ask for a passport, anything like that. The result of this, we lost the case, and we had to pay the money. We ended up fundraising for it. Luckily, our readers were super supportive. We ended up raising more than we lost. It became a rallying point, but the consequence of this is Samandal, as it moved on, decided to, a lot of the original team members retired, and then there's new people who have taken over. But the result of it is Samandal, especially also the way that things have progressed in the region, now it gets published in France, and the editors are now residing in France, and it just comes out over there. Really, it's a little bit sad, but yeah, it's a result of this this kind of pressure.
Yeah. So we have to kind of sum up here, but I would like to ask you, like, have you heard of many cases like this in Lebanon, or what do you know more generally about the situation for publicists?
This is a situation that, I mean, sadly, first of all, Lebanon is considered the free country in the Middle East, where there's more of a liberal press, but that freedom is really just connected to like a weak state in that sense. And what you end up having is different parties that control, like we saw the Catholic Media Center that sort of came after us. In the region in general, it's much harder. So there are very similar cases in Lebanon in terms of all culture, but also in the region. I mean, there's famously, before Samandal came out, there's a comic called Metro that came out in Egypt, which sadly got very famous because Hosni Mubarak banned it and threw the authors and publishers in jail. We always hear, I mean, it's not only with comics. Censorship in the region is, I mean, it's very present. Usually you have to get permissions to publish, and this is why I was talking about the publishing license. And this has gotten worse as time has gone by. Those liberties have just shrunk. There is less, I mean, at least I remember everyone asked us in 2009, why, like back then, why did you go to court? Like, obviously you're going to lose. Why don't you try to solve this outside of court? Back then, it was a different time. And you could think that something like this could be held up in court. Now, like, especially now in 2023, after several collapses, a massive economic and financial collapse, these institutions do not work. So things are a lot worse, and it's a bit it's every man for himself, basically.
Okay, Fadi, thank you so much. We could keep talking for an hour or two more, of course, but we're gonna let Maria in, and but first maybe look a little bit at Kolta on the web, I think, just to have a look at what it looks like. So Maria, maybe you could tell us a little bit about
what kind sorry.
Just what kind of text you publish, and what your mission is as a journal.
Sure, I'll be glad to. And once again, thank you so much for having me here. So Kolta and its predecessor, OpenSpace.ru, was, as it is, shut down by the state for now. It was launched in 2008, and it was planned and designed as a universal cultural online daily, something that would be able to speak about cultural matters in Russia and abroad in the quantities that would be similar to the quantities of information on business and business newspapers or something like that. Because back then it was evident that cultural issues were underrepresented and thus under-noticed. And so we have started with a number of departments that was mainly that were mainly dedicated to culture. And after that, in a few months, in half a year, Russia invaded Georgia, and we understood that, of course, well, cultural is political on every possible level, but we didn't have a department that would allow us to talk about political affairs or societal affairs explicitly. And so we changed our structure and we launched our society section that was and is edited by Mikhail Radgauz. And it became one of the most important sections of the publication, and maybe one of the most visible ones. And so that was the way we were working. Our daily audience was, well, not that impressive, judging by the figures of Russian audiences. You know, the country is big, but we were doing maybe about 600,000 to 800,000 per month, which is a nice figure for a cultural publication. And we used to work as a regular media with investors and stuff. And then in June 2012, after an unprecedented wave of political protests in Russia, our publication was closed down by the owners. No, not exactly closed down, but well, he decided to sack a couple of leading figures, me, I am the founding editor, and my deputy editors. And then the team decided that they're not staying, and we sort of changed places. And well, as Fadi says, we were having an amazing wave of support from our readers, and so we decided that no, we're not working anymore with private investors, and Russia's political climate doesn't allow us to collaborate with the state or with any state-funded institution. So we decided to try out crowdfunding, and it worked. We were able to raise money on relaunching the website, doing the new design, doing the new structure, whatever else, and to support us for it happened in 2012. So for practically 10 years.
Yeah.
And we were the first crowdfunded publication in Russia. And I'd say maybe the most influential cultural one until, sadly but predictably, we were closed down by the state in the beginning of March 2023.
Okay.
That's, the general story.
Yeah, so this is when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started, right? So,
yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that process? Like, how did you realize that you were banned, and what happened?
It was evident that at some point they would be coming for us, because, it was and still is a long-going process. The process of destruction of independent media field in Russia, it had started together with the new century when Putin came to power. And back then, it was not so evident that it is all part of an elaborate plan. So the facts seem to be, disjointed. But at first, they've closed down an important independent TV channel with a huge number of audience, and it was the beginning. And they were, slowly, steadily trying to either to buy out, or to close down, or to find other options, other ways to silence everything, starting with the TV channels, then moving to huge internet publications. And when I'm saying huge, I mean billions of monthly readers, and millions, of course. That's how it was going. But still, you had an illusion that if you are, for instance, not visible enough, or maybe at least in terms of a cover, you are, like Kolta, dedicated to cultural matters. So not crying out loud that we are a political daily, but to pretend that we are mainly and primarily focused on culture, that it sort of gets you from the state attention. We used to have some problems with the state during our existence, of course, but and we were subject to paying some penalties, but it never was a huge thing. It was predictable, and we were doing some things that were quite risky. But still, there was this illusion that you are able to get away with things up to some point. And the point of no return happened on February the 24th, 2022, in the day of the full-scale invasion, because after that, the remnants of what used to be a flourishing media field were practically wiped out, and they were coming from one publication to another, banning them, closing them down, while declaring them to be foreign agents. That's not so new invention of the Russian state. There are degrees. You may be declared a foreign agent, which is an easy thing, and it means that you are or used to be connected with some Western media or Western company or just Westerners, which of course made us quite open to danger, because we were having partnerships with a lot of foreign institutions, and basically some of our donors were some of the donations were coming from abroad, and it amounts to €5 donation is enough for you to become this doomed foreign agent. And there are other options. You can be called an unwelcome organization that is practically criminalizing you, and so on and so forth. But at the outbreak of the war, I think they didn't have time to bother themselves with complex judicial processes, and so after maybe in 2 weeks after the war had started, the invasion had started, we just woke up and saw that we are not able to access the website anymore. It was not, the pages were not opening. And then after a while, maybe in 5 or 6 hours, we received a letter from Roskomnadzor, that's a censoring agency in Russia that is watching out for any illegal activity. And when they are unhappy with something, they are basically sending you this letter saying that you've got this nasty article at this and that page. Please take it away, or we'll be proceeding further. And then you decide what to do, take the article away or to rephrase something. There are ways of, saying the same thing, but rephrasing it. But it was not the case. It was March the 8th, and it was not the case back then, because in this letter, it was also declared that we are publishing things that are illegal and undermining the state authorities. But in this case, they were not specifying any concrete article, but they gave us our main address, signifying that, well, the whole website's existence is illegal from now on, and that's what happened. And so now, to be able to read Kolta, you have well, from the Russian territory, you have to use a VPN, and we stopped the publications. We are doing some small special projects here and there, but mainly I am thinking about restarting it and well, relaunching the whole thing. But it poses a certain number of, well, moral and practical questions, because on the background of the war, you are unable, of course, to follow, well, cultural events in Russia. That is definitely not something we would be willing to do. So we have to rethink the whole enterprise, and yeah, we'll see how it would be evolving. But now we've done this partnership with Glänta, and here is the newborn issue. And I want to thank Yuran, because it was extremely interesting, intense, and, well, fascinating to be working together on this issue. And it is a huge honor for us to be, well, presented on within the Swedish cultural field.
Yes, that's so nice. So I have a question for you, just to kind of maybe catch the issue a little bit. Like, it's named Glänta becomes Kolta, becomes Glänta. Could you tell us a little bit about the title and what you mean by that? Well,
I think that is the question to Yuran, as the Glänta's editor-in-chief and a supervisor of the project. But it was extremely kind of Glänta to lend to lend its pages to Kolta. The issue is a sort of an anthology. It is covering the Russian, well, mainly political thinking as it was unfolding at Kolta's page for the last 12 or 13 years. And I would say that it might be quite instructive for understanding of the, not only of the sad situation, tragic situation of Russia as it is now, but also of the ways it was developing, and of the, well, mental processes that we were of course always trying to put our collective finger on what exactly was going on, to catch the zeitgeist. And I think that for those who are interested in the origins of what had happened, and also in the way the Russian intellectual community was trying to cope and mainly to resist. It would be really interesting.
Yes, for sure. I read most parts of it and I learned a lot, and it's really interesting also what you're saying, that you could see a process. And also, of course, the text that's about the future is also very strong, I think, like how to imagine a future going on from here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So maybe I could just let Göran in, for Göran Dahlberg, who is the editor of Glänta, for a short. Maybe you want to also say something like how did this collaboration come up, and why did Glänta decide to leave space or give space for Kolta in this issue?
Hi, yeah. First, I would like to follow up on I think it was very interesting what Fadi said, that every issue they made was made in collaboration with another partner, and I found that very interesting. And there is something happening in this collaborative process from when one journal. Well, what is said on the cover of this one becomes another, which in their turn becomes the first one. Again, there's this kind of mutuality, and yes, like Maria told us, we've been working on this for 1 year, and it's recently out, this issue, and we haven't really been able to evaluate it together yet. So. And maybe this is not the time to do that, hopefully, because it's 1 year of work, and this kind of it's also some kind of like you said, Maria. It's also an evaluation process of not only 10 years of Russian politics and culture, but also of Kolta, and this kind of, I think this kind of, to be able to be really to do this kind of work, it's fantastic to do that together, and also in this kind of translation process, because mainly I would say for our sake that we have learned so much about how in the Russian society how a journal which at least was a little bit like our own was addressing their audience, and that is, so you could also, that is something that you couldn't know from a specific article. So that's why it's a whole issue. It's a journal one journal turning into another one, and I think this kind of mutual evaluation processes, it's also something that could be, you need the precision in the translating process, which is more where you can both widen the scope and deepen the actual concrete meaning of the crucial concepts. So.
Thank you, Göran. So maybe we have a few more minutes left, so maybe we could invite Fadi again. And I think we have a question also from the audience, mainly maybe focused for Kolta. The question is, Maria, do you think there is a difference when it comes to how the state thinks about publicating in the print or on the internet? Are there any differences when it comes to censorship or the freedom of expression?
I would say, well, first of all, practically, all the existing print media have a digital twin now. So it gets it harder to weigh up the importance of print nowadays. I wouldn't say there is a huge difference, and the way you realize that well, the state is after you is well, it always comes a little bit unexpected, and while saying it, I mean not only the media field, but well, the culture in general. For instance, the state is very much interested in contemporary theater, and it is really going after the people who are leading some small independent theaters, after the directors, after those who are well leading these theaters in well, more administrative terms, and it doesn't matter if the audience is huge or not so huge. Some of the theaters are so tiny. I mean, the average amount of viewers of the audience is 20 to 30 persons, but still the state perceives them as immediate danger. I'd say, yeah, it is very much the same with paper publications, at least for the last year and a half. And I'm trying to follow what is going on. And I'd say that within the few magazines, even literary magazines that still are surviving, the evidence of self-censorship is very clear. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So that's something that you have in common, this kind of that you don't really know what to expect. I think Fadi, in your story, it was also like, oh, so this is what got the state attention or the church attentions. So Fadi, do you have any reflection after listening to Maria, like any similar experience?
Actually, I have, yeah, I think it sounds somewhat similar, although on a different scale, I would say. I mean, the number of readers of Samandal compared to Kolta, I do not compare, but it is the same approach, and I think I mean, it seems like it's almost the same process. So I wanted to know from Maria. I mean, we were actually printing. What we wanted was to have the comics in people's hands, which may be an old school thing. I mean, obviously there's web comics, and we published web comics, but there was something about having comics in print that sort of made it, you know, its own medium. Of course, that makes things so much harder because you have these physical things that you first of all have to carry across borders. So in some ways, this makes censorship harder. I mean, and also to answer the question that was asked, in Lebanon, and I think in most of the Middle East, it's actually the same print laws that apply to everything digital. Our laws have not been updated, so they use the same kind of legal apparatus to come after. So sometimes it will come after people who publish something on Facebook and use publication laws from 1940s and 1950s. These laws haven't been updated. So yeah, it's a little bit similar to what Maria was talking about, where like, will you remove that post, please, or maybe write an apology, and you sort of write like something that sort of vows to the state, I promise I will never do this again, you know, and it's kind of like a first warning kind of thing. And yeah, it's sadly, as again Maria was talking about, as the censorship increases, you find some kind of self-censorship or people removing themselves. They're like, okay, we want to publish, want to say the things that we want to say, and then either the editors or the publication itself gets moved or it gets shuttered down. Maria, I wanted to know was, the website is obviously not actually hosted in Russia because it was still functioning, but the editors are residing in Russia, and were you guys worried about you being personally, legally, was there any kind of legal follow-up to this kind of censorship?
Yeah, Fadi, thank you so much. Yeah, that is important, and well, that's what's that's what is making our situation now so complex, because we had well, not so huge editorial board, around 8 people, 8 to 9. And now all people who were all the people who were working at Kota are sort of scattered across the globe. Someone has landed in Argentina, someone in Georgia or Armenia, and a good part of Europe. So it is a huge movement. But some of our editors are still residing in Russia, and it poses the question when we think of relaunching the whole thing, because, on one hand, we definitely don't want to endanger those who are still staying in the country, but self-censoring yourself on European soil, for instance, it is also an absurd activity. So we really have to come out with a concept that would be, able to provide our editors some degree of safety, and still would allow us to be effective, or even to exist as a media, because I wouldn't be interested in going on in the mood of self-censoring, especially nowadays. But yes, that's the general picture. But and you are staying in Lebanon for now? Or?
I am, yes, but I'm not a publisher of Samandal anymore. So in that sense, I mean, we're publishing something else now, and we're as we were talking sort of before we went live, a lot of these things sort of stay in your head. And I mean, now it's on a completely different project that has more to do with animation. We're also covering the Middle East, but we're an online, we're online, and in some ways this provides us with cover. I mean, but at the same time, what it kind of does, and this is what we've realized, is it also exposes us to all kinds of harassment from all over the region. So what our lawyers told us is our judiciary in Lebanon right now is really like it's not. The judges are on strike, and it's kind of a mess because of the state of the country. But what happens right now is if someone in Saudi Arabia does not like what we published, they just need to pick up the phone, call someone in Lebanon, and the cops will probably come after us and tell us, hey, either take this down or then it gets more serious. So it kind of exposes you even more. It's what was supposed to be a protection in some ways sort of allows for much more meddling, which is something that we have to consider. And again, like even just having your servers in one place is something, but also personally being persecuted in the region sort of makes it like, okay, I don't have a problem with one country now, I have with several countries.
So that's really interesting, because usually when you think of freedom of speech, you think of like a really dominant state, but now for you the problem is actually the state is so weak that all these other actors can. Okay, so I'm so sorry, but we have to wrap up. Actually, I knew it before we started that we would feel incomplete with these 45-50 minutes, but still so interesting to just work and how your strategies and how you keep publishing, and really interesting also to see that there are ways of collaborating internationally, and how a Swedish journal like Glänta could also make a difference and help out in different situations. So hopefully other journals here in Sweden can also see how they can play a role and reach out internationally. So thank you, Maria, Fadi, Göran. Thank you everyone for attending. Have a good day. The sun is shining, sort of shining in Gothenburg, hopefully wherever you are as well. And yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.